Every day across America, elderly citizens answer their phones expecting to hear from a friend, family member, or legitimate business. Instead, they find themselves talking to criminals thousands of miles away who are about to destroy their lives. This is the story of how one hacker infiltrated a massive scam operation and exposed the brutal reality of how these criminal enterprises work. The story begins with a simple email. Someone claiming to work inside a scam call center reached out to a cybersecurity expert. This person said they had no idea they were working for criminals when they first took the job. They thought they were doing legitimate customer service work for a home care company. But slowly, they realized something was wrong. The scripts they were reading didn't match what they were told the company did. The customers seemed confused and upset. That's when it became clear they were part of something much darker. This insider was willing to help expose the operation. They provided access to the computers inside the call center, allowing the hacker to see everything that was happening. What the hacker discovered was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The first location was in Churachandpur, a small district in northeastern India near the border with Myanmar. This is not where you would expect to find a scam operation. Most of these criminal call centers are located in major Indian cities like New Delhi, Kolkata, or Bangalore, but Churachandpur is remote and isolated. According to the insider, this was the very first scam call center to ever operate in this part of the country. When the hacker gained access to the computers, the working conditions became immediately apparent. 27 computers were crammed into a small space with plastic chairs, tiny screens, and outdated equipment. The walls weren't even finished. There was no air conditioning, no clean water, and no food provided to workers. The people making these calls were earning just $2 a day for working night shifts. They had no medical insurance, no pension fund, no transportation home, and no paid time off. These terrible conditions exist because law enforcement in the area is either corrupt or powerless. The insider explained that the bosses running the operation don't worry about getting caught because they have connections with local police and underground militia groups. The workers have no choice but to accept these conditions because there are no other jobs available. But the real crime isn't how these workers are treated. It's what they do to innocent people thousands of miles away. The scammers in Churachandpur focus on what they call lead generation. Their job is to collect personal information from victims that can be sold to other criminal groups. They call people in the United Kingdom and claim to be from the refund department of a home appliance company. They tell victims that they are owed a refund of £119 because of a mistaken charge on their account. The script is simple but effective. The scammer says, "Hello, am I speaking to Mr. or Mrs. Customer? I'm calling you from the refund department of your home appliances, and this goes to inform you that we're about to refund you the amount of £119, which was mistakenly been charged from your account when you pay for your home appliances warranty." Most people, especially elderly victims, want to be helpful and polite. When someone claims they owe you money, your first instinct is to provide the information they ask for. The scammers request your address, postcode, and email address. Then they ask more detailed questions. Do you have life insurance? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have funeral plans? What kind of washing machine do you own? These questions might seem random, but each piece of information has value. The scammers are building a profile of each victim that determines what type of scam will work best on them. Someone with life insurance might be targeted with funeral scams. Someone with a mortgage might be approached about home security systems. Every detail matters. The victims have no idea that by being polite and answering these questions, they are setting themselves up for months or years of harassment and theft. When someone falls for this initial call, the consequences can be devastating. Imagine an elderly person living alone, still learning to manage household finances after losing their spouse. When the phone rings and someone claims they're owed a refund, they want to help sort things out. They provide their address, postcode, and email. They confirm they have life insurance and still have a mortgage on the house. They mention what kind of washing machine they own. The caller seems professional and polite, so they don't think twice about answering the questions. After hanging up, they feel good about the interaction. They're getting money back that they didn't even know they were owed. But what they don't realize is that their information has just been entered into a database that will be sold to multiple criminal organizations. The scammers in Churachandpur don't actually steal money directly from their victims. Their job is just to collect information and then hang up. The real theft happens later, when this information is passed to the headquarters operation in West Bengal. But even at this basic level, the psychological impact on victims is severe. Within days of that call, they start receiving more phone calls. Someone claims there's a problem with their life insurance policy. Another caller says their home security system needs to be updated. Each call feels legitimate because the callers already know personal details about their life. They start to feel overwhelmed and confused. They can't understand why so many companies are suddenly calling them. They begin to doubt their own memory. Did they really sign up for all these services? Are they forgetting things more than they used to? The stress starts to affect their sleep and their appetite. This is exactly what the scammers want. Confused and isolated victims are easier to manipulate. Each phone call makes victims feel less confident in their ability to handle their own affairs. They start to rely more on what these friendly callers tell them. The psychological manipulation goes deeper than most people realize. These scammers are trained to identify vulnerability and exploit it. They know that elderly people often feel lonely and appreciate someone taking time to talk with them. They know that people who have recently lost a spouse are struggling with new responsibilities. They know that someone living on a fixed income will be interested in saving money or getting refunds. The scammers use this knowledge to build false relationships with their victims. They remember personal details from previous calls. They ask about family members. They express concern for the victim's well-being. Over time, victims start to see these callers as helpful friends rather than criminals. Victims find themselves looking forward to the calls. The young man who calls about their insurance policy always asks how they're feeling and whether they need help with anything else. When he tells them that their policy needs to be updated to prevent problems, they trust his advice. When he explains that they need to provide their bank details to ensure the new policy takes effect immediately, they don't hesitate. This is when the real theft begins. The scammers set up direct debit arrangements that allow them to take money from victims' accounts every month. They start with small amounts, usually around $10, hoping that victims won't notice the charges right away. For someone living on a pension or social security, $10 a month might not seem like much, but victims are paying $10 to multiple scam operations. Between the insurance scam, the home security scam, the warranty scam, and the funeral plan scam, they're losing $50 or $60 every month. Over a year, that's hundreds of dollars stolen from someone who can't afford to lose any money. The emotional impact is devastating when victims finally realize what has happened. They discover the unauthorized charges when reviewing bank statements before a doctor's appointment. They need to pay for a prescription, but their account balance is lower than expected. When they call the bank to ask about the charges, they learn that they've been enrolled in multiple services they never requested. The feeling of betrayal is overwhelming. They trusted these callers. They thought they were helping them. Instead, they were stealing from them month after month. They feel stupid for being fooled, even though they were the victim of a sophisticated criminal operation. The financial impact extends beyond just the money stolen. Victims have to spend hours on the phone with their bank trying to stop the direct debit charges. They have to file police reports that likely won't lead to any arrests since the criminals are in another country. They have to change their bank account number and update all their legitimate automatic payments. The stress takes a physical toll. Victims start having trouble sleeping because they worry about what other scams they might have fallen for. They become afraid to answer their phone, which makes them feel more isolated than ever. They lose trust in legitimate businesses and become suspicious of every phone call or piece of mail they receive. For many elderly victims, the psychological damage is permanent. They never feel secure again. They constantly worry about money and whether they're making the right decisions. Some victims become so afraid of being scammed again that they stop managing their own finances entirely, giving up their independence to family members or caretakers. This is the human cost of these scam operations. It's not just about the money, although for people on fixed incomes, every dollar matters. It's about destroying people's sense of security and independence at a time in their lives when they're already dealing with loss and change. The scammers in Churachandpur processed hundreds of calls every day. Each successful call generated personal information that could be sold to other criminal groups. Workers who collected information from a certain number of people each day could earn bonuses on top of their $2 daily wage. But the Churachandpur operation was just a test. The real headquarters was located in West Bengal, and it was much bigger than anyone imagined. When the hacker noticed that the computers from Churachandpur suddenly had new IP addresses, he realized the equipment had been moved. The small operation had apparently failed to meet expectations, so the bosses decided to recycle the computers and move them to their main facility. Working with a friend, the hacker quickly found the new network and discovered something incredible. There were CCTV cameras monitoring the new location, and the password protection was so weak that they guessed it within minutes. What they saw was shocking. The West Bengal headquarters was massive. The hacker spent time mapping out the facility based on the camera feeds and counted 155 computers. This was the biggest scam operation he had ever encountered. The scale of this operation means that hundreds of people are making thousands of calls every day. Each call has the potential to destroy someone's life. The number of victims being created by this single facility is staggering. Unlike the workers in Churachandpur who only collected information, the scammers in West Bengal actually completed the theft process. They convinced victims to provide banking details and set up the direct debit arrangements that would steal money for months or years. The hacker was able to identify key people in the organization through the camera feeds. One man in particular stood out because he was the only person with a laptop and a dual monitor setup. He was clearly in charge, with other workers bringing him reports throughout the day. He had access to the CCTV cameras and the administrative controls for the phone system. This man matched the description provided by the insider months earlier. His name was Uday, and according to the insider, he was the vice president of the scam company in charge of running the headquarters. The hacker was able to confirm this by finding Uday's Facebook profile, which showed him working for something called PP Enterprises. Everything in the call center was connected to PP Enterprises. All the computers were named PP, documents had the PP Enterprises logo, and the phone system used the domain pp.globaldialer.co.uk. The administrative username for their phone system was literally Uday. When the hacker found Uday's phone number written on a whiteboard in the Churachandpur facility, he decided to test whether it was really him. He called the number using FaceTime, and Uday answered. The man who had been stealing from elderly people for years was suddenly face to face with someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Documents found on the company's servers reveal the structure of the organization. One document stated that nobody can touch anything in the office without Uday Sir's permission. There were videos of him giving speeches to employees. Facebook photos showed him in the same call center as far back as 2015, proving that this operation had been running for over 10 years. 10 years of stealing from vulnerable people. 10 years of destroying lives and taking money from people who could least afford to lose it. Thousands of victims, each one believing they were talking to legitimate businesses, each one having their trust and financial security destroyed. The hacker realized that law enforcement in West Bengal was unlikely to take action against such a large operation that had been running for so long. Corrupt officials were likely being paid to look the other way. It would be up to him to do as much damage as possible to these criminals. The first step was deleting their network drive, which contained 4 years' worth of victim data and operational information. These files documented thousands of crimes and represented years of work by the scammers. The hacker made backup copies for law enforcement but destroyed the originals so the criminals couldn't use them anymore. Next, he targeted Uday's personal Google Drive account, deleting system backups and important files that the organization used every day. These weren't just random documents. They were the tools and scripts that the scammers used to steal from people. But before shutting down their phone system entirely, the hacker decided to have some fun with the criminals. He rerouted their calls so that instead of reaching potential victims, the scammers would be connected to him. Imagine being one of these scammers, following your script, trying to steal from what you think is an elderly person, and suddenly realizing that the person on the other end of the line knows exactly what you're doing. The hacker was able to waste hours of their time, disrupting their operations and preventing them from reaching real victims. The conversations were surreal. Scammers would start their practice scripts about warranty refunds or insurance problems, and the hacker would turn the tables on them. He would ask them questions about their own lives, their families, whether they understood that they were criminals stealing from elderly people. Some scammers hung up immediately when they realized what was happening. Others seemed confused, as if they had never really thought about the impact of what they were doing. A few became angry and defensive, but their anger couldn't hide the fact that they knew they were caught. After disrupting their operations for as long as possible, the hacker finally shut down their phone system entirely. Suddenly, an operation that had been stealing from people for over 10 years was completely silent. No more calls to elderly victims, no more friendly voices asking for bank details, no more direct debit theft. The hacker also obtained the complete list of current victims who were having money stolen through direct debit arrangements. He began the process of contacting these people to explain what had happened and how they could stop the unauthorized charges. For victims, this contact would come as both a relief and another shock. Relief that someone was finally helping them stop the theft, but shock at learning how organized and extensive the criminal operation had been. Many victims had no idea that the friendly callers who seemed so helpful were actually part of a massive international crime syndicate. The psychological impact of learning the truth is complex. On one hand, victims feel validated that their suspicions were correct and that they weren't just being paranoid or forgetful. On the other hand, they feel even more betrayed when they realize how deliberately they were targeted and manipulated. Recovery from this type of victimization takes time. Even after the direct debit charges are stopped and some money is recovered, the emotional damage remains. Victims often struggle with feelings of shame and embarrassment. Even though they were the innocent parties in these crimes, family members and friends sometimes make the situation worse by asking why the victim didn't realize it was a scam sooner. These questions, even when asked with good intentions, can make victims feel more foolish and isolated. The truth is that these scams are sophisticated psychological operations designed by people who understand exactly how to manipulate human emotions and trust. The scammers in these operations aren't just randomly calling people and hoping to get lucky. They use detailed scripts that have been tested and refined over years of experience. They target specific demographics that research has shown to be more vulnerable to particular types of manipulation. They use psychological techniques that are designed to bypass people's natural skepticism and caution. Understanding this helps victims realize that being fooled by these scams doesn't reflect any personal weakness or failure. It reflects the criminal sophistication of the people who targeted them. The economic impact extends far beyond the individual victims. When criminals steal millions of dollars from elderly people, that money leaves the legitimate economy. It's not being spent on groceries, medicine, utilities, or other goods and services that support local businesses and jobs. Instead, it's funding criminal organizations that use the profits to expand their operations and victimize more people. The cost to financial institutions is also significant. Banks have to investigate unauthorized charges, reverse transactions, and implement security measures to prevent future theft. These costs are ultimately passed on to all customers through fees and reduced services. Law enforcement agencies spend enormous resources investigating these crimes, even though successful prosecutions are rare when the criminals are operating from other countries. The FBI estimates that Americans lose billions of dollars every year to international phone scams, but very few of the perpetrators are ever arrested or prosecuted. The human cost is impossible to calculate. How do you measure the value of someone's sense of security and independence? How do you quantify the stress and anxiety that victims experience long after the financial theft has been resolved? How do you compensate for the isolation that results when elderly people become afraid to answer their phones or interact with businesses? These are the questions that the criminals running these operations never consider. To them, each victim is just a number in a database, a source of revenue to fund their operations. They don't think about the elderly man who stops taking his medication because he's afraid he can't afford it, or the widow who gives up her independence because she no longer trusts her own judgment. The hackers' infiltration of this massive scam operation provided a rare glimpse into how these criminal enterprises actually function. Most people only see the end result, the phone calls and the theft. They don't see the industrial scale of these operations, the sophisticated technology, the detailed victim databases, or the management structures that coordinate the crimes. What makes these revelations particularly disturbing is the realization that this was just one operation in one part of India. Similar criminal call centers are operating all over the world, targeting victims in every country that has vulnerable elderly populations with access to telephones and banking systems. The PP Enterprises operation in West Bengal had been running for over 10 years before it was exposed. During that time, it had stolen from thousands of people and generated millions of dollars in illegal profits. The fact that it was able to operate for so long without being shut down by law enforcement demonstrates how difficult it is to combat international cybercrime. Even after this particular operation was disrupted, there's no guarantee that the criminals involved won't simply set up new operations in different locations. The technology is readily available, the scripts and techniques are well understood, and there will always be new groups of criminals willing to steal from vulnerable people. This is why individual actions like the hackers' infiltration are so important. While law enforcement agencies struggle with jurisdiction and international cooperation, individual cybersecurity experts can sometimes take direct action to disrupt criminal operations and protect potential victims. The hacker's decision to reroute the scammer's calls to himself instead of allowing them to reach real victims probably prevented dozens of people from being victimized that day. His deletion of their victim databases and operational files set back their criminal enterprise by years. But perhaps most importantly, his documentation of the operation provides evidence that could eventually be used by law enforcement agencies if they decide to take action. The detailed information about the company's structure, the key personnel, and the specific crimes being committed creates a roadmap for any future investigation. The story also highlights the importance of awareness and education in preventing these crimes. Many victims could protect themselves if they understood how these scams work and what warning signs to look for. The most important thing for potential victims to understand is that legitimate businesses don't call customers asking for personal information or banking details. Real companies don't offer unsolicited refunds or claim that warranties have expired. Genuine customer service representatives don't pressure people to make immediate decisions about financial matters. Anyone who receives unexpected phone calls about insurance policies, warranty refunds, home security systems, or other services should hang up and independently verify the information. If someone claims to be calling from your bank or insurance company, hang up and call the company directly using the phone number on your account statements or their official website. It's also important for potential victims to understand that it's okay to be rude to callers who are asking for personal information. These criminals count on people's natural politeness and desire to be helpful. There's nothing wrong with hanging up on someone who's trying to steal from you, even if they claim to be from a legitimate business. Family members and friends can help by checking in regularly with elderly relatives and discussing any unusual phone calls they've received. Many scam victims are embarrassed to admit they've been fooled, so they don't seek help until significant damage has been done. The story of the PP Enterprises scam operation is ultimately a story about the vulnerability of trust in a connected world. The same technology that allows families to stay in touch across great distances also enables criminals to reach into people's homes and exploit their trust and kindness. But it's also a story about the power of individual action to fight back against these criminals. One hacker with the right skills and motivation was able to shut down an operation that had been stealing from people for over 10 years. His actions probably saved hundreds of future victims from being targeted by these particular criminals. The fight against international scam operations requires both individual awareness and coordinated international law enforcement action. Until governments around the world take these crimes more seriously and work together to prosecute the perpetrators, individuals like this hacker will continue to be on the front lines of protecting vulnerable people from criminal exploitation. The criminals running these operations count on their victims' shame and embarrassment to keep their crimes hidden. They rely on the complexity of international law enforcement to avoid prosecution. They depend on people's natural trust and politeness to gain access to personal information and banking details. But when their operations are exposed, when their methods are documented, when their victims are warned and protected, these criminals lose their power. The story of how one hacker infiltrated and destroyed a massive scam operation proves that these criminals can be stopped, and their victims can be protected. Every person who learns to recognize these scams and refuses to provide personal information to unsolicited callers is a victory against these criminal organizations. Every elderly person who hangs up on a suspicious caller instead of being polite is striking a blow for their own security and independence. The criminals behind these operations may be thousands of miles away, but their impact is felt in communities across America and around the world. Fighting back against them requires both technological expertise and simple human awareness. The story of Uday and his massive criminal enterprise shows both the scope of the threat and the possibility of fighting back successfully.